Good morning. Open back to Exodus. Exodus chapter 13. It's fitting that we would be talking about this story in the Bible of freedom, especially on this weekend. As Dave mentioned earlier, we think of people in the military now, and of course we think of the people who fought 250 years ago to fight for our country's freedom. It's really remarkable. It's amazing how in the historical record, many of the founding fathers wondered if we could survive as a nation, how long it would go, maybe a generation, if not less than that. And here we are, 250 years later, with so many evidences of God's providence and grace and kindness to us as a nation and to us individually in terms of being born here, or some of you migrating here. It's a blessing, it's a gift, and it makes us think of freedom, and that's an awesome thing. And our story here in the Bible, in the book of Exodus, is about freedom in an even greater sense. So if we think about the people who fought and died for us in the past, they did something for us. We are benefiting from, we're beneficiaries of that fighting. Well, we are beneficiaries of, in a greater sense, God fighting for us. And that's our topic this morning, how God fights for us, how God fights for our freedom. We're going to be in chapters 13 and 14. And we're going to look at certain passages throughout as we continue the story. But I want to point you to chapter 14 and verse 14 for starters, just so that you will see explicitly here that God says he is fighting for his people. And we can say not only was he fighting for them back then, but he is fighting for us today as well. And we'll talk about exactly what that means. But look at verse 14 of chapter 14 of Exodus. The Lord will fight for you while you keep silent. So there it says it explicitly. There's another reference to it in the story. And the whole thing really is about God fighting for his people. And I want to give you a little bit of a spoiler. When God fights for his people, and this applies not only back then, but this applies today as well. When God fights for us, when he fights for our freedom, often it looks like and even feels like, catch this, it feels like he's fighting against us. So as we get started, I want you to begin to wrestle with that concept. It feels like he's fighting against us, when in reality, he's fighting for us. As we move through this morning, we'll see what that means and how it applies to us and how it helps us, liberates us at the deepest levels. It's so good, and it points to Jesus, as we have seen with everything in this story. Once again, it points to him. The context of this, before we start looking at the passage, the context of this, Pharaoh is now letting the people go. God has unleashed the deadly plagues. We spent extra time on the last one, the death of the firstborn, the Passover. And so Pharaoh has been persuaded to let the people go. That's where we left off, all right? And the Israelites even were able to, in God's provisions, they were able to plunder the Egyptians. So they left with gold and silver and clothing. They had abundance as they were leaving Egypt and heading for the promised land. That's where we left off, okay? And so we're going to make these observations in terms of God fighting for his people, God fighting for them back then, God fighting for us today. We're going to make some observations as we move through in terms of what that looks like specifically. And for starters, it looks like God leading them into danger. Remember I said just a minute ago, sometimes it looks like God is fighting against us. Well, here we go. He's leading them into danger. Notice this, the end of chapter 13, begin in verse 17. And we're going to read down to chapter 14, verse 3. It says, Now when Pharaoh had let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, even though it was near. For God said, the people might change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. Hence, God led the people around by the way of the wilderness to the Red Sea, and the sons of Israel went up in martial array from the land of Egypt, which just means they went up in orderly fashion. They didn't have an army, as you recall, so it just means they went up in orderly fashion, and God was leading them a certain way for a certain reason. Look at verse 19. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, For he had made the sons of Israel solemnly swear, saying, God will surely take care of you, and you shall carry my bones from here with you. Then they set out from Succoth and camped in Etham and on the edge of the wilderness. The Lord was going before them in a pillar of cloud by day to lead them on the way, and in a pillar of fire by night to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. So God is leading them along, step by step, with them, manifesting himself so that they would know where to go. Verse 22, he did not take away the pillar of cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. And then jump to chapter 14, verse 1. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, tell the sons of Israel to turn back and camp before Pihahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. You shall camp in front of Baal-Zephon, opposite it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the sons of Israel, they are wandering aimlessly in the land. The wilderness has shut them in. So here they are, trapped. Right at the end of verse 3, the wilderness has shut them in. Who led them to this spot? God led them to this spot where they would be stuck, vulnerable. In one sense, they were excited to leave Egypt. They had all this abundance. I'm sure they felt confident. The text even points to that a little bit later. There was a boldness and a confidence. But here they are, stuck. God has them on purpose, really hedged in. What is he up to? The text explicitly says the wilderness has shut them in. Now this makes me think of a line from a movie from years ago that is loaded with rich theological truth. The title of the movie is Kung Fu Panda. I don't know if you've seen that movie. But one of the lines in the first of them, I think there are, 4 or 5 of them, they're all good. They're all entertaining. But the first one, there's this guy, the turtle, Master Oogway. And one of the things he says in that movie is, one often meets his destiny on the road he takes to avoid it. One often meets his destiny on the road he takes to avoid it. Don't we at times in life feel like, boy, I'm just stuck. How did I end up here? I never would have chosen this path if I knew where I would end up and how hard it would be, how painful it would be, how taxing it would be, whatever. I mean, I never would have gotten involved in that relationship had I known all the cost. I never would have taken that job. I never would have moved to that area. I never would have bought that house. I never would have, over and over and over again, all the examples. This passage is pointing us to a God who is guiding us along. We have free will. We make decisions. That's part of our privilege, being created in God's image. And God is behind the scenes, guiding things along, sometimes in very obvious ways, sometimes in less obvious ways, but he is orchestrating things such that we end up right where he wants us. And oftentimes that is confronting us with our deepest insecurities, our deepest desires and our deepest struggles when those desires go unfulfilled, and it can manifest itself in all these different areas of our lives. But God is the one who leads his people into these difficult places on purpose. If he's the same yesterday, today, and forever, we can assume that just as he is doing that in the lives of his people, back in this story, he is doing that in our lives as well. So let's keep moving. Secondly, notice that God hardens the opposition. Look at verse 4. Thus I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will chase after them, and I will be honored through Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord, and they did so. And it goes on to talk about how they mobilized their army, and they charged after the Israelites who were vulnerable, stuck there, penned in. But God hardened Pharaoh's heart. That's interesting, isn't it? Pharaoh was, as we've talked about from the beginning of the study, he was an egomaniac, filled with pride, greed. He had hardened his own heart. There's several times where it says that he hardened his own heart, and God works in such a way, somehow without violating Pharaoh's sense of freedom. He has some human freedom, but God is so good at what he does that he works in such a way that he hardens Pharaoh's heart. He influences the hearts of people. Proverbs 21:1 says, "The king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, and like channels of water, he turns it wherever he wishes." God is in control to that level, such that even the opposition, people who oppose them, people who oppose you and me, the people that are the hardest to deal with, God's in control of that. He's over that. He's up to something through that. He's working through the opposition, and he's making clear what he's up to. Here, he's making it so that his people know him. He's making it so that, in a sense, Pharaoh comes to know who he really is. He's causing, as we just read in the text there, that he's going to cause Pharaoh to honor him, to see the gravitas, the weight of God's being as the true God over all the false gods of Egypt. And Pharaoh, who really thought of himself as a god of sorts, like God is showing himself as the one and only God. That's what he's doing. And it even involves the hardening of the opposition. And so there are the Egyptian soldiers charging against and after the Israelites. Well, thirdly, God exposes fear. He exposes fear. Look at verse 10. As Pharaoh drew near, the sons of Israel looked, and behold, the Egyptians were marching after them, and they became very frightened. So the sons of Israel cried out to the Lord. Then they said to Moses, "Is it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you dealt with us in this way, bringing us out of Egypt? Is this not the word that we spoke to you in Egypt, saying, 'Leave us alone that we may serve the Egyptians'? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." So they're afraid because they're stuck and they're like sitting ducks. I mean, you know, the old expression is like shooting fish in a barrel. I mean, this is what it would be like for the Egyptian army because the Israelites are stuck and vulnerable. There's no way out. And understandably, they're afraid, as any one of us would have been afraid. Now, this is fascinating. If you go back to verse 8, just a few verses earlier, and I think I mentioned this already, but it says at the end of verse 8 that they went out boldly. That word could be translated defiantly, confidently, triumphantly. So just a few verses earlier, they are pressing forward. The Israelites are confident. Like, this is great. We're on our way. We're going to be free. But when they turn around and they notice, here come the Egyptian soldiers. Now they're terrified. Now they're filled with fear. And so they cry out in fear and they begin complaining right away. Moses, I mean, how did you come up with this stupid idea? Why couldn't we just stay where we were? Yeah, it was bad, but it was better than this. We're about to all be slaughtered. They're afraid. And isn't that common to mankind? So easily filled with fear. And all it takes is a little circumstantial change, some threats of one kind or another, which God is behind, right? As we just observed a moment ago, he's behind that. All it takes is something like that, and it brings that fear to the surface, and it shows us that at the end of the day, we really believe that we're the ones responsible for our own safekeeping. That's what we really still believe. And so fear comes out. And and this is what happens with the fear. We want to go which direction? We want to go backwards, right? Can we just go back to the way that it was before? When at least we felt some sense of security and safety. There's an old song, Christian song, written and sung by Sarah Groves, is the artist's name. And it's called "Painting Pictures of Egypt." And at one point in the song, she says, "I'm painting pictures of Egypt and leaving out what it lacked The future looks so hard, and I want to go back. She says, painting pictures of Egypt and leaving out what it lacked. What did it lack back there in Egypt? Well, they had their food. They had their basic needs met. They were slaves, yes, but if you go back farther, they were flourishing there in Egypt for a long, long time. But they were lacking, weren't they? They were lacking in a very important, the most important way. They were lacking in that their view of God and their understanding of God was very small. Their experience with God was very limited. Their false sense of security, which they could take human pride in, that was magnified, and God and His provisions was minimized. And so God orchestrated circumstances in such a way that they would be brought to the end of themselves and that they would have to see God. For there was no other option, no other way. And when that happens, we can assume that we are being prepared to see God in clearer, richer ways when we are experiencing, when there is the surfacing of our fear, when we're afraid. Because He's showing us, see, you do still believe that your good, your well-being, your safekeeping is up to you, and I'm showing you actually it's always been up to me. And so what we experience in the middle of that is fear. What? Why this? I wouldn't have done this. I would have done anything to avoid this. I mean, I chose, as Master Uguay there, I chose a different road on purpose so as to avoid this. This is my worst nightmare. God is up to good in it. He knows what He's doing. So He exposes fear. Moving somewhat quickly here, but the next observation, He promises deliverance. So the Israelites are complaining, as usual, like we would do, lest we pig pile on them too rapidly, like this is what all of us would do. God promises deliverance. Look at verses 13 and following. But Moses said to the people, do not fear, stand by and see the salvation of the Lord, which He will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you have seen today, you will never see them again forever. The Lord will fight for you while you keep silent. Then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the sons of Israel to go forward. As for you, lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. And the sons of Israel shall go through the midst of the sea on dry land. As for me, behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, so they will go in after them. I will be honored through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. Then the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I am honored through Pharaoh, through his chariots and his horsemen. God is saying, I promise to deliver you. Now this is another little interesting observation, but if you back up to verse 13 again, notice here Moses' boldness. Moses said to the people, do not fear. Stand by, see the salvation of the Lord. And then Moses is the one who declares, the Lord will fight for you while you keep silent. But look at verse 15. Again, the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? So like in public, Moses is this stalwart leader. Don't be afraid, go forward. And in private, it's like, God, what are you doing here? He's crying out, God, help us, right? That's about right. That's how it usually goes. And God says, I'm going to help you. And here's your part. You tell the people to go forward, and here's my part. I'm going to harden Pharaoh. I'm going to harden the Egyptians. They're going to come after you, and I'm going to deliver you. I mean, this is what He's been saying all along throughout this story. In the past, we've seen God talking about His strong hand, His right arm. I mean, all these things. God said, I'm going to take care of you. And now we're coming to like this climactic point when God is going to liberate them in a way that is unmistakable in terms of who did it. So He promises deliverance. Fifthly, He confuses opposition. Look at verse 19 and following. The angel of God, who had been going before the camp of Israel, moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them. So it came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel, and there was the cloud along with the darkness, yet it gave light at night. Thus the one did not come near the other all night. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord swept the sea back by a strong east wind all night and turned the sea into dry land, so the waters were divided. The sons of Israel went through the midst of the sea on the dry land, and the waters were like a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. Then the Egyptians took up the pursuit, and all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen went in after them into the midst of the sea. At the morning watch, the Lord looked down on the army of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and cloud and brought the army of the Egyptians into confusion. Here's God confusing them, disrupting. He caused their chariot wheels to swerve, and he made them drive with difficulty. So the Egyptians said, "Let us flee from Israel, for the Lord is fighting for them against the Egyptians." So even they are realizing, wait, God is doing something here. What is happening? I mean, ordinarily this is more smooth than this. They're all over the place. They're swerving. They're colliding. They're disrupted. It's chaos. And God is doing this, demonstrating his ability to make changes whenever and wherever and however he wants, never to be thwarted by humans and their false sense of strength. God is absolutely involved in all the details. And so he parts the Red Sea. The Israelites enter on dry ground. The Egyptians are in pursuit. And then notice next, God destroys and rescues. He destroys and rescues. Look at verse 26. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may come back over the Egyptians, over their chariots and their horsemen." So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its normal state at daybreak while the Egyptians were fleeing right into it. Then the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, even Pharaoh's entire army that had gone into the sea after them. Not even one of them remained, but the sons of Israel walked on dry land through the midst of the sea, and the waters were like a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. If you look up, I've got just another little AI-generated graphic of that. And you get the idea. Obviously, it's kind of a little too perfect, as typical with AI stuff, but you get the idea. I mean, they're going through, and there are these walls of water. They get through to the other side, and after the last Israelite steps foot on the other side, and the Egyptians enter, and once the last Egyptian enters, God brings the water in on them and destroys them all just like that. He eliminates fully the enemies of the Israelites. He takes care of them in a way they never could have taken care of themselves. He fought for them. They never could have fought for themselves. They never would have won. God won this victory for them, destroying the Egyptians completely, swallowing them up. I mean, it's amazing. It's one of the most well-known stories in the Bible. And it points us forward. We've been saying that the enemies which were outside of the people back then, that is, physical enemies, other people, we've been saying throughout that what God is teaching us through this story today, in light of the gospel and the new covenant, he's teaching us about the enemy within and what he has done to conquer our greatest enemy, which is not someone else or some circumstances, but the enemy within of our own blinders, our own pride, our own desires, our own sin. That's the real enemy. The real enemy we have no chance of conquering ourselves, any more than the Israelites could have beaten the Egyptians back then, the strongest of militaries, and the Israelites had nothing. I mean, never could have happened, but God did this for them, and he fights for us as well. And he does it to deepen our faith. And I want to say more about that in just a moment. But one last observation I want you to see in the text here. In terms of what he's up to, he's deepening their faith. This is what they needed the most. This is why God led them this way. This is why it wasn't easier. This is why it was long and drawn out and twists and turns and ups and downs. This is why he was building their faith. Look at verses 30 and 31. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. When Israel saw the great power which the Lord had used against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. See that? As a result, they believed. They were convinced that God had done this. They were persuaded that God and God alone had rescued them. They were hopeless, helpless, defenseless, ignorant, limited in every way. And God had rescued them. And he was teaching them of himself, opening their eyes to see him, opening their ears to hear him, opening their hearts to receive him. That's what they needed. And that's what he was up to. Even in the surfacing of their own complaining and their fear, that's what he was up to. It even says in verse 30, this is so interesting, the end of the verse, Israel looked, and what did they see? They saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Many chapters ago, back in chapter 3, God said, hey, I promise this is going to happen. I promise I'm going to get you out of here. I'm going to accomplish this victory for you. And you're going to be in this place, and you're going to worship me. And that's going to be the sign. When you worship me, you'll know that I accomplished this for you. He predicted this victory was going to happen. And here they are now, and they look back, and what was before future tense is now past tense. They look back at what God had done, and they even see the evidence of it in the corpses of the Egyptians. The ones who threatened them are now dead. So as we bring it together with gospel clarity here, I want to ask you, if the Egyptians back then represent the problem that sin is for us, always has been, continues to be, till Jesus comes back, always will be the human problem. If the problem of the Egyptians, if that was the threat back then, and the threat today is sin, where do we look to see sin conquered? Now, as you're beginning to think about that, I want to submit to you this concern that there is a message out there you hear oftentimes in churches, even with the Bible being taught, that would lead you to believe that where you should look to see sin conquered is inside of yourself. In fact, if you can't see enough killed or mortified sin, then you're probably not a true Christian. There's a lot out there, echoing messages that would tell you that. But if you're honest with yourself, just for a moment, would you just consider this reality? If you look within yourself and you see yourself with clarity, and you know who God is and what God deserves in terms of perfect love and loyalty and worship, and you know what His definition of love is for Him and for other people, and you know the demand of selflessness and service and gratitude at every moment, if you know the height of God's law and what God says is right and appropriate for His creatures, if you know Him with clarity, you have to come to the conclusion as you look within that you actually see, if you're seeing precisely, if you're seeing accurately, here's what you see. You still see pride. You still see fear. You still see anger. You still see anxiety. You still see insecurity. You still see that you're obsessed with yourself and how things go for you. You see that it infects and invades even the most religious things you do. You still see that, boy, at every turn you look, there's still just you staring back at you. That's what you see when you look within. So when we look for the corpses, where do we see the evidence that this war has been won? We don't look within. We look at the cross. We see Jesus crucified. We see His dead body and we say, God took care of my sin. Amen. He conquered it for me. And I get to be free. As we say a lot, God's not looking for you to fix sin. You couldn't fix sin any more than they could free themselves back then. You're not fixing anything. But He fought and won for you. Your sin is forgiven, cleansed, buried in the bottom of the ocean. God uses that imagery to say it's buried. He separated you from your sin as far as the east is from the west. He refuses to call your sin to mind. He conquered your sin. And he's inviting you to believe that, to trust in that. And trust in that involves not looking within and saying, okay, I'm gonna. No. It's looking at Christ and saying, he accomplished. He defeated. He conquered. He took it upon himself. He died. And he rose victorious to evidence the fact that I have been justified, declared right with God because of something someone else did. 250 years later, we are benefiting from blood that other men and women spilled. In the grandest sense, in terms of spiritual realities of the gospel, we are beneficiaries of the blood that Jesus spilled for us. He fought for you. You get to be free. You're given the plunder, the spoil, the riches for free. The question is, do you believe that? That's the fight. That's the challenge of the Christian life. We often put it in terms of us wrestling with sin and trying to beat our sin down and trying to take power over it and all that. No, the real fight is, can you believe that it's actually already conquered for you? That's the real battle. Which is why Hebrews says, without faith, it's impossible to please him. And why Paul says, whatsoever is not of faith is sin. See, the real sin underneath all sin is not just that we think bad things and do bad things. It's that we believe that if we were just God, if our safekeeping could just be up to us to manage life in our way, whether the irreligious way or the religious way, but we can take, that's the temptation, and the gospel just detonates that. It buries it in the Red Sea, so to speak. It puts it to death, and it resurrects you in the truth of who Jesus is for you. Your conquering hero, your rescuer, your Savior, who did the miraculous thing, who saved you from your own rebellion in ways you could never save yourself. He just did it. It is finished. He accomplished it. We're being taught to believe him, to trust him, to look back at the cross over and over and over again, to know that's where God did the real work, dying for us, taking upon himself our sin, our guilt, our shame, raising his son, and calling out to us to go free, which is why Paul says in Galatians, it is for freedom that Christ has set you free. These are people being liberated, being set free. We are people who have been set free. For them, future tense, God's doing things. For us, past tense, we look back and say, that's what accomplished our freedom. In fact, the passage Dave read earlier from Revelation, we know Jesus is coming as a conquering king one day, but what prepares us to actually see him as he is and to receive him as that conquering king when he does finally put an end to all physical manifestation of sin in this world, what prepares us for that is to see that we need him right here, right now, within our own hearts and minds, and that he's the provision for us, and that our hope is in someone other than us, it's in him. That's what faith is. It looks to us and sees only guilt and sin and death, and it looks to Christ and sees forgiveness, reconciliation, redemption, life. Back in verse 14, he had said, the Lord will fight for you as you keep silent. Some translations translate it as you sit still. I hear someone quoting right now, be still and know that he is God, right? I heard someone say years ago, I thought this was clever and helpful. There's that expression, don't just sit there, do something. A passage like this, really the entire Bible is inviting us. Don't just do something, sit there. It's not just that there's stuff to do. More importantly, there's a God to know. Who is he? What is he like? What's he revealing about himself? He's helping us to see him. Listen, there are lots of things to fight in life. We're honest about this a lot. You got to fight against, every day to get up. For some of us over middle age, it's like you're fighting the aches, the pains to get out of bed in the morning. You're fighting fatigue. You're fighting laziness. You got stuff to do. The DIY project at home isn't going to accomplish itself. It's not going to finish itself. You got to do it. You fight to study. You fight to exercise. You fight to go to the grocery store. You fight through the traffic and the potholes and all the construction, right? Everywhere you turn in this state, construction. We are number one for something, Rhode Island. Number one for the worst roads in the country. Let's give ourselves a round of applause. Yeah, that's an actual fact. Look, you're battling everywhere out there, and you have to do that in the natural realm. That's appropriate. Go out there and fight through, okay? But when it comes to the spiritual realities of the heart, the realities that matter most to God, that you would see him for who he is, that you would know his love, that you would know his peace, that you would know his joy, that's all a gift given to you. The battle has been won. He already fought it, conquered. He is victorious. You are now free to rest and enjoy the plunder, so to speak, the benefits of his victory. Jesus has done it for you. You in him, as you trust him, you're alive. You have what you need. Whatever the battle, the fray of life is doing to you out there, he has you, you have him, you can't lose. This whole world is passing away. But God is everlasting. And those born of God will live forever with him. And that's not just that, hey, we're going to be in a good place and it's going to be great and things are going to be better than Rhode Island or Earth or wherever your geographical location that you're thinking of. It's not just that it's going to be better than that, it's that you're going to be finally, fully seeing God as he is. And that is going to exhilarate you forever. And there will be joy and celebration, the likes of which we only get tiny little glimpses here. And for us to experience those glimpses, it is our responsibility to be honest, to say, God, I can't rescue myself any more than they could have. God, I look at myself and I just see my own gigantic ego, my own defensiveness, my own desires, my own inconsistency. I see where I can be so often selfish, serve myself rather than other people. I see my bad attitude, my ingratitude. So often that's what we see. And he says, I know. So look to the cross. Look to someone else. Look to the one who says, I am the wellspring of life. I am the source of joy and peace. Remember Jesus said, my joy I give to you. My peace I give to you. That says he gives, we receive. That's life. That's freedom. It is the most valuable of gifts we could ever have. That God has opened our hearts, helped us to see him as he is, and to trust him, and to walk through life with all the challenges, knowing that he's faithful. He never changes. That's our hope. I hope that's an encouragement to you. Let's close in prayer before we have the worship team come back up. Lord, thank you for the book of Exodus. Thank you for the great reminders of who you are, what you accomplished thousands of years ago, and what you're still up to in our lives today, bringing us to the end of ourselves, surfacing our fears, our insecurities, our desires, showing us what we are made of, and showing us who you are. Your perfection, your love, your kindness, your mercy, You have set us free in Christ. We are so grateful. Help us, Lord, even as we sing this final song, to sing out of hearts filled with gratitude for who you are and what you've done. And help us to grow in grace and knowledge of that truth. In Jesus' name, amen.